You know, when it's your turn, I hope you do a little better than me.
Welcome to Decoding TV's coverage of The Last of Us, Season 2, Episode 6, The Price. Patrick Klepek, overall thoughts on this episode, which is a flashback episode that takes us back in time into Joel and Ellie's happier times.
I think this might be my favorite episode
Of the whole series.
Of the whole series.
Yeah.
It's a really... I'm like two minds of it. On one hand, I think it's a really profound, moving episode of television. Gives some excellent, I guess what feels like closure. I think the episode sure gives you the sense that we are saying goodbye to Joel and we are moving forward with Ellie. And I think in serving that purpose, I think it does so really, really well, and gives a lot of insight into who Joel is and why he acts the way he does. And I found that very moving, especially as a parent as well. I found myself, I don't think I am a Joel, but a lot of what Joel articulates about the struggles of being a parent and being aware of one's failures and weaknesses is certainly something I understand. On the other hand, kind of in my heart of hearts, was killing Joel a mistake? Was all of this the wrong decision? Was there a better show, more stories to be told about these characters that is better than the one we're about to get? Getting to the end of that episode sort of makes, it's like, I think this was a lot of evidence for a different show and a different story.
Yeah.
And so I kind of ended up with of two minds by the end, which I think feeling the latter speaks to the power of the former, but it's kind of how I felt about Last of Us Part 2 as a video game. I was like, respect it. Doesn't mean that I agree with it. And I think I sort of fell similarly by the end of this episode.
I mean, the problem is Pedro Pascal is just too good. That's the problem, right? He is too good of an actor, and he is ridiculously good in this episode, and it is really, really difficult when you lose an actor of that caliber in the show. But I thought this was a great episode. Really, I think if you look at kind of what the show has done, and again, the game does this to some degree as well, but like just looking at the show by itself, I really think that a lot of the show is just looking at what the human capacity is for good and evil, right? And for love and hate, right? And you see characters like Joel who are capable of monstrous acts, but also capable of love. Sometimes the two are related, by the way. And this episode really kind of brings a conclusion, right? Or seemingly a conclusion to the Joel Ellie arc to explain like the state of their relationship at the beginning of season 2, so that you understand like why there was the tension and awkwardness, but also like helping you to understand potentially the unresolved place that the relationship was at when it came to an untimely end, right? And maybe there's a lot of stuff that Ellie didn't have a chance to say to Joel, or vice versa. And that's another kind of component of the show, is that we never know when our last time with our loved ones are. Like so many times throughout the course of this show, people who care about each other, it's just like, oh, and then boom, they're gone. Like it happens a lot. And happened this episode, in fact, right? And so that's another kind of point that the show tries to land overall, and I think it really fully lands it in this episode, because obviously, like Ellie and Joel, you know, maybe they'll show us more flashbacks that fill in time period, but like we mostly saw, you know, stuff that happened, you know, alternate timeline stuff from the first episode of this season. And then shortly after, Joel died, right? So it's like, it's not like a ton of time has taken place,
right,
after the events that we see in this episode, and then when Joel died. So it's like, you never know when that it's going to be the last conversation you have with someone. And I think the show wants you to reflect on this immutable fact of the universe. And it does so pretty well. Okay, let's get into what actually happened this episode. It's Austin, Texas, 1983. We see young Joel and Tommy. Tony Dalton plays the father.
Anytime Tony Dalton shows up, my wife audibly like, excuse me? It's like, I think because of his turn on Better Call Saul,
he's so good.
incredible
Ridiculously
villain
good in that show.
And
Yeah.
if you didn't see that show, go fix it. But I think for anyone that did see it, Tony Dalton just turned into an actor who's like, didn't really know who you were before. You're no longer a character actor to me. You're just a guy who shows up and you're like, all right, some stuff's about to happen. Like Tony Dalton is here.
He's awesome. He plays Javier Miller, according to his Twitter account. And we learned that Tommy was buying drugs off someone, and there was a scuffle, and Joel's super protective. He doesn't want Javier to beat Tommy. And instead of beating Tommy, they have a conversation. Joel's father expresses regret that he didn't do a better job of being a father, but he tried to do better than his father, and maybe Joel will do the same. Then we have the opening credits. So actually, let's just talk about this for a second. Patrick, any thoughts on this and how it tied into the themes of the episode?
Yeah, I mean, this one landed because, again, like I don't rank myself and my parenting with Joel and Javier, but there's a version of a joke that a lot of parents tell each other, which is like, oh, you're putting aside money for college, oh, you're putting aside money for vacations, and you're also putting aside money for the trauma you're inflicting on your child that they will later unwork through a therapist, which is to say, like, one can have the best of intentions and like not be fully aware of like the impact you're having on your child, how they perceive it, how they'll work through that. And so much of how you parent your kid is in direct relation, not necessarily opposed, like sometimes it's in concert with, but there's a little push and pull in both directions with how you were raised and like, oh, here are my lessons from that I'll apply going forward. But that does not eliminate your own weaknesses and faults and along the way. And so, for a show, for a tale that is about, and especially in this season, cycles of violence and like what do we take from the past and apply forward, filtered through ourselves. I thought this was like a really poignant, like we don't get a lot of insight into Joel pre pandemic other than like what we learned from Tommy, but mostly it's about like the people they are like as a result of the cordyceps outbreak. So I really enjoyed this moment, and I think brings a lot of the themes of The Last of Us, Part 2, especially into some real clarity. Especially as like we like start to work through the generations of like Joel's father to Joel to Ellie to, in theory, a pregnancy that she claims she wants to be, a parent to. And so that brings a lot of this very close to home.
I'm going to be honest. I thought that, like, I love Tony Dalton. I thought the performances are great. Like, it's a great scene, right? Like, it's a well-acted scene. It's effective. I don't know how I feel about tying it in with Joel's struggle as a parent, because what Joel did is so on a scale that's literally like unimaginable compared to what Tony Dalton is talking about. He's like, my dad or my grandpa or whatever beat me super hard, and like I'm beating you guys slightly less. Joel is just literally like murdered a bunch of people that could have stopped the apocalypse, and it's like, okay, but you'll try to be a better parent to your kid than me. And it's like, I understand what the show is trying to say. Cycles of violence, sins of the father passes. I get it, but it's just like
this is one of those things that like, I could sit and tell you I would not do what Joel did.
Sure.
Like hey man, like of course, like no, like I should save the world. And then like 3 like beers later, sitting to myself like on the couch, was like, oh, yeah, I'd probably like have picked up the gun. I don't think I would have gotten as far as Joel.
You wouldn't have carved a swath through.
But I think I would have tried. And I think that's like I totally get your response. Like this seems sort of silly and disproportionate. But I think part of what you have to buy into with the show and its story is that Joel does not see that as disproportionate.
Yeah.
And
a
lot
of
of
core
parents,
idea is the same.
A lot of parents, if you were to ask their like actual truth, is that they would not. They could sit and tell you logically, like, like, especially if my child had agency and like was making a decision, like, but like a parent would be like, no, I would go find the nearest gun, and like I would have I would have tried to do the exact same thing. And I think that's part of the that wrestling with that, like, and how silly it's like can seem is part of what makes it all work. But I don't blame anyone for looking at that and be like, well, that feels a little. And it's like, well, but I think a lot of parents would be like, yeah, I agree. But also, like, we would all get together and like get our guns and like go rescue our children from that hospital, right?
Well, because it's like a triple. Like Joel committed like a triple crime, right?
Mhm.
Like he murdered all those people.
Mm-hmm.
He took away Ellie's agency.
He committed
And-
future murders,
right, and then potentially cost like lots of future people lives who get infected, right? Like, and so like Patrick, one of those things, I'm like, okay, like, oh, you're gonna murder a bunch of people to like, you're gonna murder a bunch of people to prevent your child from getting killed. Like, I totally get it. Like, that's, but all three, it's like, I guess it's not it's all one thing for him.
It is all one thing for him. Like, and I think part of what the show is getting at is parenting is like, it is irrational. Like parenting, like love for a child, you cannot separate like what is like evolutionary biology. You know what I mean? Like there is on some level, the feelings that I have for my kids is purposely irrational. like it is meant like you are meant to like have this sort of irrational bond with these things that you have like played a part in creating. And so if you take that irrational love to its logical end, you end up with how Joel explains. I don't know if he justifies as much as he explains. Here's why I did what I did. You don't have to buy it, but this is why I did it. And I think that's one of my favorite parts about the decision of why Joel, like, because it takes that idea of like, I'd do anything for my child. It's like, well, would you? And then it like presents you with an impossible situation, and yet one that I think a lot of parents would go like, yeah, like I'm not saying what Joel did was right, but
That all makes sense, Patrick. The only last thing I'll say is like I find the removal of Ellie's agency to be the far more unforgivable crime. Like,
sure.
Killing a bunch of people to protect your kid, like, I get that makes complete. But the other thing is like, that's like, okay, that's really horrible. That cannot be explained by evolutionary biology.
Well, but it's and I think we'll get into this as the book goes on. When does a child
that is explained by selfishness? Right?
Well, but when does a child have agency, and when do you allow them agency?
Right,
like that,
right,
those are really like, and I think this episode gets into what different versions of what every parent goes through is like, it is your job to be the protector, and then at some point it's your job to step back. And when you do that and how you do that, unfortunately, there are no clear rules on that one.
I want to say, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube at youtube.com/@decodingtv, welcome. Be sure to give us a subscribe over at decodingtv.com or at the Decoding TV podcast. We got Matt Goldberg writing up recaps. He did a beautiful recap for this episode. It's free to get the recaps. Just sign up at decodingtv.com. Also, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you might not be subscribed to decodingtv.com if you're listening to this. Be sure to subscribe, decodingtv.com. It's free. Check it out. Okay. We cut to Jackson. And then I really love the structure of this episode. It's similar to the like Nick Offerman episode in season 1, right? Where like we're seeing Ellie on her 15th birthday, then cut to the 16th birthday, and then cut to the 17th birthday, and then cut to the 19th birthday. Like we're experiencing their lives through the lens of birthdays, right? Or not the 19th birthday. I think this is No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, it's the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 19th birthday. But we see Joel has been in Jackson for 2 months. He's trading some Legos with Seth, the bigot from the first episode. We learned that Seth used to be a cop in the Milwaukee PD.
Yeah, least shocking revelation of all time.
Yeah. Joel assembles a guitar for Ellie. It's a beautiful sequence. Ellie comes in. She's burned herself because she really wanted to wear short sleeves again because she had the zombie bite and she had to cover it up, but she burned herself so that it would be like, oh, it wouldn't be obvious that that's what was going on. But it's Ellie's 15th birthday. Joel's got her a cake and the guitar, and Joel performs and sings the song Future Days for Ellie.
I'm not found by myself.
And it's pretty lovely, I have to say. Pretty lovely.
It's one of those that show that song doesn't exist in the the timeline. Like if you were to Pearl Jam writes and releases that song. Like they've addressed this. They're basically Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin were like, sometimes a good bit is just a good bit. I think there's a story later, we'll get into this, but like the actor who plays Eugene, I think they originally put up in the Ellie's either room, or I don't know if it was in the garage or the house, but she had a picture from The Matrix, which obviously stars the actor from like in this episode playing Eugene, and they had to in post-production remove it so it didn't contradict the world. I say just don't be just leave it up. That's a funny Easter egg. IMO.
There is I have seen Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, and there is a scene in that movie where there's a bunch of DVDs on a shelf in the background, and one of the DVDs is Minority Report. So
yes!
Tom Cruise exists in the Mission Impossible universe.
Yes, let's go. I love that stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, so okay. We cut to 1 year later. It's Ellie's 16th birthday. Ellie wants to go out on patrols, but it's his birthday present that Joel got for Ellie is they're going to a science museum, and they arrive at the capsule that was sent up in on Apollo 15 in 1971. Joel gives her this tape of the mission, and it's like a really transportive experience for her. It's very lovely. So, and then 1 year later, it's happy 17th birthday for Ellie. But Ellie's hooking up with a tattoo artist, and Joel's unhappy she's doing all the teenager stuff at once, the drugs, the sex, and the tattoos. And he also doesn't seem to like accept that she's gay. I don't know if you got that sense.
Yeah, there's definitely if you want to be charitable, he's surprised that maybe it never crossed his mind, and so like in his ignorance, he gets a little homophobic.
Right.
You want to be, given where he ends up, that is like the most, look, this is a guy who,
this is a guy who knows how to make a guitar. Okay.
He knows how to make it. He grew up in like 60s South, not necessarily was, so I'm not excusing his behavior, but I'm not shocked at the response necessarily. But yes, I do think you were meant, like, there's a little bit of like, oh, and that as well, because he says, the line that sort of seals that interpretation is like, let's talk about this later when you're yourself again. And I guess you could look at that as you're high, or when you go back to liking dudes like you were supposed to.
Right. Anyway, wanted to ask you your thoughts on these scenes before we get to like the big one, which is when Ellie is 19. I thought these are just like really lovely like slices of life of their relationship together in the days leading up to what happens in the first episode of this season. But I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to say about it, Patrick. We will have more to discuss in the decodingtv.com bonus episode for paid subscribers, where we compare what's going on in the game with the show. But yeah, go ahead.
I would say part of what I really appreciate about this, and why I was in some ways rooting for, a theory we had on what the season might be, which is like, oh, maybe we're just not going to move forward on the plot of The Last of Us Part 2 very much, and instead it's kind of a season in Jackson, and like we'll end with heading off to Seattle, and like that will just be a future season thing. Obviously, that's not the way that this season has gone. It's adhered much closer to the timeline of the video game than we theorized. But part of what really worked for me in this episode was, season one, the relationship that they form, sure, kind of eventually becomes this father-daughter relationship, but being a protector is not being a father. Like being a mentor figure is not being like defending someone. And part of what we see over the course of these birthdays, these years as they're in Jackson, and they settle into being a father and a daughter. Like there's like aesthetically set up that way in the first season, but they accept that relationship and then have to figure out what that is when they're in Jackson. And that's just totally different. Like that is a very different set of circumstances of what you're asking from one another. And that's what makes, I think, it's such a rich like text in this episode, is watching the two of them, succeed and fail at trying to communicate what they want from one another and what they get from one another. Because I mean, part of what, one struggles with, my kids are much younger, but is how does each side articulate that? And, Ellie and Joel are fortunate enough to like have a moment where they fully articulate how they like feel about one another and what they mean to one another and how far they're willing to go in terms of like honesty and forgiveness. But that is a difficult road to navigate as Jackson allows Ellie a chance to find an identity. Joel kind of knows who he is. Ellie's shaking that up a little bit, but he was a parent before he met Ellie. And so it's not as though this is a person who, I don't know what it's like to like, this damn child landed in my lap, but I got to figure out how to be a dad. Like, no, like he wanted to be a dad. And then it was interrupted by the tragedy of losing his daughter. But getting to the age that Ellie is at, that's a whole different can of worms. And to do that as a solo parent, is itself a different set of challenges. So I really enjoyed all of this stuff. And it made me think, God, I hope I handle it better than Joel. Low bar, honestly, but I hope I handle it better than Joel.
As long as you don't take actions that doom humanity, Patrick Klepek, you're probably doing okay.
You're right, but like being a girl in high school, there are things that I could do that would feel as pronounced, David. You know what I mean? Like I may not live in an apocalypse, but there may be things that I could do to my daughter that could be perceived as apocalyptic. And I just don't know what those landmines are going to be, probably until I step in them.
The only other thing I want to mention about these scenes, and then we'll get to the one that happens when Ellie's 19, is that that Joel essentially got what he wanted to a large degree, right? Like he murdered a bunch of people, he doomed humanity's fate. Because he thought of Ellie as a daughter, and then they got to have that relationship. They got to have the father-daughter relationship.
They got to move to the suburbs. Right? Like Jackson. Yeah. Like I'm sure we get the impression that the sort of horde attack that happens this season is an anomaly.
Yeah.
Yes, it like terrible things exist on the periphery. People die. Someone getting bit and then put down as a citizen of Jackson sounds like equivalent to someone gets cancer. It gets like stuff happens, people die, and it's often tragic and quick and unexpected. But it's as close as you're going to get to moving to the suburbs that you're going to get in this world, and they get it. Like he gets it.
All right, let's talk about what happens when Ellie is 19. 2 years later, Ellie has a list of questions she wants to ask Joel about the events of the end of season 1. She's like practicing, like asking all these questions about like why was it that like because it was suspicious. It was suspicious what happened, and she's always had these suspicions and she's held on to them. But her birthday present is Joel taking her out on patrols for the first time, and everything's going smoothly. But there's an infected north of Pinnacle, and they see Eugene, who's played by Joe Pantoliano. He's been bitten. He wants to go back to see his wife Gail. The person who's basically the character of Gail is, what if a therapist was an asshole? She's the one played by Catherine O'Hara. Anyway, Joel doesn't want to let that happen. Joel tells Ellie to get the horses, and he promises he'll get Eugene to join them and meet the horses downhill or wherever the hell they're going, but immediately breaks that promise by leading Eugene out to a lake to kill him. And they have this like very powerful exchange where Eugene says he really wants to see Gail's face. And Joel says, if you love someone, you can always see their face. But then, he ends up shooting Eugene. The idea is like Eugene wanted to say, hey, take me back to the camp. We'll keep me outside the gates, and then I can see Gail one more time before I die. And Joel like doesn't even want to take that risk. And it's pretty heartbreaking the extent to which he doesn't want to take that risk. Like Eugene is like begging for this to happen. And Joel is unmoved. But anyway, they get back to camp, and Joel tells Gail that Eugene ended it himself, which is like, wow. Like, by the way, I found it to be like mildly comical, like Joel's story, because he's like improving basically. He's like, Eugene, he was really brave all the way to the end, and he wanted to say he loved you, and he ended it himself. He's just like making up shit like to make this good, and also he gave me his guitar, and it's like he's just like making stuff up. I'm like, okay, you're going a little too far. And then Ellie contradicts Joel's story.
Brutal.
It's extremely, extremely awkward. And says to him, "You swore," because he promised that he was not going to do anything to Eugene. But yeah, I mean, and it recontextualizes Joel's actions at the end of season 1. Basically, like that what happened at the end of season 1 was not a one-time event. It's not a thing where like Joel just did it one time because it's extraordinary. He is used to lying. He is used to lying, and he is used to being protectionist over himself and his people. And it's a look and a promise that Ellie recognizes. So that 9 months later, after these events, when we're caught up in the events of present day, we're at the New Year's Eve party, but from the point of view of Joel this time, and we see the conversation continue past where we saw it earlier, where Ellie forces Joel to tell the truth and asks some uncomfortable questions like, were there other immune people? Were there raiders? Could they have made a cure? And gets all the answers that she wanted and realizes exactly what Joel has done. But she's already suspected it for quite a while. Patrick, what do you think about these scenes?
Well, I think they're like as a parent, you encounter obviously things with much lower stakes than what Joel and Ellie are going through, but part of like being a parent is like trying to figure out when your kids see through your bullshit, and oftentimes it's like bullshit that you're using to protect them, right? Like, when are you prepared to have this conversation? Like if you want to, like, sex and stuff like that. Like, and children for a long time, like they don't know any better. They don't. The world is what you tell them it is, more or less, and they take it at face value. And then at a certain point, like that ceases to be the case. And like part of it, I think the tragedy of what happens here is Joel being with like a feeling I think every parent can sympathize. Like, oh, I loved this sort of relationship we had. I wanted it to be like this forever. And it's the evolution of you parenting a child and then a child becoming a peer, like their own person, their own thoughts, their own feelings. And they're able to call you out on, things you say or contradictions. And I think Joel's just so desperate to sort of hang on to this version of Ellie that he's had, that like where he like kind of fell for her as like a daughter, and is just unwilling or incapable of like treating her like an adult as she like clearly demands. And this is a world where people become adults faster than they would otherwise. I think he has like many offhand comments throughout this season where it's like we're in Jackson, like go be a kid. It's like that's just not the world she's in, nor what she's interested in doing. So I found out all that really interesting and relatable. And just like, I don't want to, like, when we get to the scene with them exchanging information and sort of like being honest with one another truly for the first time in many years, like, and it's not as simple as like turn the acting dial up like to 11, but there is like a little, like, I'm not accusing either of them of like overacting or being overwrought. I think they both like just really brought it, but it's just like very funny, like to get to the scene. It's like, it just feels like, all right, so like, so we've been acting like an 8, like can we like put it to like 11, 11.5, and like that's what's happening here. But I thought it was a beautiful scene between the two of them. And for a show that, this just happens in spectacle shows, like, and there are lots of quiet moments in The Last of Us. I think it's part of what makes the show, the game, the story work, is these characters like really working in this world. But there aren't that many times where I feel like they're both allowed to, like, these actors are allowed to like show the full like range of their talents. And like this scene is just like a total tour de force with like both of them. Whereas like you see like what Bella Ramsey is capable of, you see what Pedro Pascal is capable of. Like, yeah, he's real charming and a handsome guy, but like, man, like I would just like very difficult to not feel it in this like 10-minute scene between the two of them, where it's just both of them laying it bare in a way that I found really heartfelt and really, really moving. Yeah.
I feel the same way. Very powerful scene. It feels abruptly cut off. I'm going to say this. Like, she says, like, I'm going to try it. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm going to try. And then it's like cuts off, and then we cut to present day. So like, I am curious if it was supposed to feel like that. But we do get the sense that there's like a lot of unresolved stuff as Ellie heads back after having what we assume is brutally murdered that woman back in last episode. Right?
which is, or whether she extinguished the life from her or not, she is doomed in the spot that Ellie has left her in. I mean, I think you're meant to feel that tension over, like, Joel denies Eugene what now Ellie and Joel. I mean, Joel doesn't realize this because he dies.
Yeah.
Ellie, this is something she could come to realize with time and distance. She got to have the, like, if you have a family member who is ill and like you get a chance to like say the say the things you want to say, like have those final conversations, like all the cards on the table sort of moment. They kind of got to have that. They didn't get to take the next step, but they got to have a final conversation where they truly saw each other. And that's what Eugene wanted. And it seemed like he could have had that, or at the very least, if Joel had just like, let's just try and bring Eugene back. And then if Ellie is the one that like, we tried, I understand why you do things the way you do, I'll put him down. It ends up being a teachable moment for Ellie, and they tried to achieve Eugene's, dream for seeing his wife again, but he robs her of that, and Joel is not robbed of that. Ellie is not robbed of that. And I think that's something Ellie will have to wrestle with distance from it, but they actually got to have that sort of final conversation where they both saw each other as their true selves, and that's not nothing.
Totally. And of course, Joel concludes by saying, I tried to do better than my dad, and you'll try to do better than me, and so on. And on and on we go with all the parents that are trying to do slightly better than their parents. Although I'm going to say, I don't know if Joel nailed it. Just going to put that out there. Don't know if Joel nailed it. Great episode of The Last of Us.
Agreed.
You think it's your favorite?
It's definitely up there. I mean, it's like, it's all the quarterstep stuff, like fighting, like that's more fun to do in the video game. You know what I mean? Like I've just seen that so many times before.
Yeah.
What makes The Last of Us work for me are the characters. And so to have an episode where it feels like the culmination of like everything these characters have gone through, and it's not that there aren't stakes, but it's like, I don't need 7 interactions with the creatures like to make a season sing. Like a moment like this of like real humanity and like these characters having a moment, like that's what I watch this show for. That's why this story resonated with me. Like the thrill of taking out a clicker. The TV show can't ever match that. That's not a comparison to that's just like, it was a video game. It's more thrilling to do that with a controller than to watch it. And so for here, what I want is these characters, and that's what I got out of this episode.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.